I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I wanted to talk for a second about the violence occurring in Baltimore over the death of 25-year-old Freddie Gray, who was apprehended by the police. He suffered severe spinal injuries. There was some indication that people knew, officers knew, that Gray was injured when they dragged him onto that paddy wagon, and that the injuries got worse on their way to the hospital. Um, uh, this protest in Baltimore is a little different from most in that there has been some violence. There are also, of course, going to be reports of looting and, people fight back against the police. The National Guard's been called in, stuff like that. And, one of the things that I am, consistently thinking about is how people respond in such a disproportionate way when black people have a very natural reaction to what I would argue amounts to a very clear genocide that has occurred as a result of the criminal justice system. You saw very recently that the FBI actually let a man spend 20 years in prison because they mistook his hair sample for the hair sample of a dog. So instead of his hair, they used a dog's hair. And I guess the dog was at the crime scene or something. So they sent this man to prison for 20 years because they mistook his hair for that of a dog. Now, I think that that's a perfect metaphor for exactly what has been happening to black people, particularly black men, in the criminal justice system for hundreds of years, not just in the past 5 years. People always say, well, Dr. Watkins, what's going on? There's this rise in police killings lately. And I say, actually, it's not a rise. The killings were probably worse in the past. The difference is that there was nobody there with a cell phone, videotaping the lynchings that took place in the 19th century, in the early to mid 20th century, or the police killings that occurred in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. This has always been happening, and what you're really seeing. And it reminds me a little bit of the reaction that people had when NWA came out with the song "Fuck the Police." A lot of people found the song to be incredibly disrespectful and scary and just provocative, unreasonably provocative. But people didn't see what they were seeing. Remember, this was a couple years before the Rodney King thing happened. NWA was like, "Fuck the police," because y'all coming in our neighborhood and treating us like we're an occupied state. We are a police state where you're coming in with your guns blazing and taking down people in our communities, destroying our families. We have institutions here. They have families that have been there for several generations, and you coming in and you got to make me watch you treat my grandfather like he's a runaway slave or take down my daddy with a billy club to his head. Well, fuck you. Fuck you. I mean, and that's what I think they were saying in this song, and that's not an unreasonable reaction to what is effectively a genocide. And I want to keep using that word because I want you to use the word when you think about what the criminal justice system has done to black men and women for the last several decades. And it escalated. I mean, it really ramped up with the war on drugs. I can't name the number of people I know who are children who grew up without a father because their father got 20, 30, 40, 50 years in prison over minor drug possession. Mario Lloyd, for example, a guy in Chicago, that's one person I brought up during a recent interview. Mario Lloyd got caught up on a RICO charge. That's organized crime. They brought his whole family down for selling cocaine. They didn't have any murders on him, no violence on him, but he was selling cocaine, which we can agree is wrong. And they gave him 15 life sentences. They also locked up his mother, his brother, and his sister. So you're locking up the entire family. You're really undermining the entire infrastructure of a community when you destroy the family. So as a result, these children grow up without parents. They grow up without mentors. They grow up without fathers. You have a fatherless epidemic in the black community now because law enforcement has been so eager to beat the hell out of black men, lock them up, give them long sentences, and marginalize them for life that the entire structure of the black family has been absolutely obliterated. So you're doing that, and in addition to that, there is that documented evidence that the CIA looked the other way while they allowed people from Nicaragua and Colombia to bring cocaine into the United States. They said, look, we don't care if you sell your coke here, just make sure you sell it to the niggas, put it in black neighborhoods. So suddenly you have have healthy, happy communities like South Central Los Angeles that become virtual war zones because now you've got drugs everywhere. Mama's getting hooked on crack, again, destroying the foundation of the black family. 16-year-old kids run around blowing each other's brains out with AK-47s, and the community is totally obliterated, and nobody's ever held accountable. These people sit back and they say, well, we don't know what's going on with the black community. We don't know why these niggas are acting so crazy. Well, we're acting crazy, and I say we because I'm angry about this as well. We act crazy because what you did was crazy. Insanity will breed more insanity. And simultaneously, while you're putting the drugs and the guns into black communities, and you have these mysterious illegal guns being sold by these capitalist corporations that are seeking to make money by any means necessary, not being regulated by our politicians who've been bought out by these same corporations, they're dropping these guns into black communities, and it's okay as long as these black men are using the guns to kill each other off, once again, supporting our genocide. In the backdrop, the theme music for the movement is this spiraling out of control kind of hip-hop music promoted again by corporations that basically has lyrics saying blow that nigga's brains out, kill that nigga, shoot that nigga, etc., etc. Things that you would never allow people to say about Jews, but you allow them to say it to black people to say it about each other. You're promoting this death. You're really saying in every word, in every language imaginable, that black lives do not matter to us and we want all of y'all dead. Well, when I look at Baltimore and I see the violence, I think chickens are coming home to roost. You've abandoned these communities. You've taken out the education. You've taken out the jobs. You're locking up all their fathers, so they have no male role models or mentors at home to guide them and to say, hey, son, don't go out there and shoot that police officer because that could be bad for you. They lose the mentors, and then suddenly you found that they're finding a purpose. They're finding a target for their aggression that does not consist of targeting each other. You see, this aggression that you're seeing in Baltimore, in my opinion, is not anything new. The aggression's always been there. The difference is that white folks didn't care because we were taking the aggression out on each other. So typically, historically, as a black man, if I get mad, if I'm frustrated because I can't get a job, I don't have an education, I got a criminal record, my life is messed up. If I'm frustrated, what am I going to do? I'm going to shoot that man right next to me. Well, now, guess what? People are waking up. People are educating themselves to what you've been doing to these communities for the last 40 years, and really even before that, if you really want to go deep into it. And now they're saying, wait a minute, my brother should not be the target of my aggression. I shouldn't be fighting him, but I got this gun on my hip, and I'm mad. I'm gonna shoot it at somebody. Maybe I need to shoot it at the person who has been trying to ruin my life. The system that has been destroying my family, destroying my community, that sent my daddy up to prison. The rapper Bobby Shmurda, when he was on this video talking about pop, pop, pop and all this other stuff, he talks about how his daddy got put in the doghouse. He's not uncommon. A lot of these young black men have fathers that have been incarcerated. And one thing that you'll know from any fundamental scientific understanding is that mammals, any male mammal, whether you're talking about humans or elephants or dogs or deer or anything, they need mentorship. Males, adolescent males need mentorship. And I'll give you an example. There was a wildlife reserve in Africa where they accidentally created a disproportionate environment. They brought in a lot of adolescent males and a lot of their mothers because their fathers had been killed. You know, again, another type of genocide. Their fathers had been killed for their tusks. So what happened was they found that when the adolescent males did not have male role models, they became much more violent, not just toward each other, but toward the other animals in the reservation. They didn't understand why these animals were behaving in this very unnatural way. Well, it was because you had disrupted the balance of the ecosystem. So when you're taking fathers out of the home because you want to give a black man a 100-year prison sentence for possessing a few grams of crack cocaine like an idiot, what you're doing is you are destroying the balance of the black ecosystem. So when people throw out that video or that article that was in the New York Times about 1.5 million black men being missing, those men ain't dead. Those men are in prison. Those men that are in prison, they're not just inmates. That's not what they were born to be. That's not what they were born as. They were born as human beings who were supposed to grow into husbands, fathers, mentors, providers, protectors for their spouse and their children. But because you disrupted the balance, black women can't find proper husbands. Black children don't have proper fathers all the time. A lot of these kids out here that are doing stuff that you don't like, that make you nervous, a lot of those kids don't have guidance and mentorship other than the hip-hop album that you've been playing on the radio for them every day saying, shoot that nigga, kill that nigga, blow that nigga's brains out every day. That's what you're doing. And then the other thing is that I will say this, the person who's the most dangerous person in the room is usually the person who has nothing to live for, who has nothing to lose. And a lot of young brothers, unfortunately, because you have marginalized them, because you have booted them out of society, because you have disrespected them so horribly, because you've treated them like animals, like that dog in the FBI hair analysis thing, because you've treated them like animals, some of them have nothing to lose. You've aborted them. You've tried to kill them. Well, they're saying, you know what? You've killed me and I don't mind that anymore. I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. But now I'm going to kill you too. Now I'm going to mess up what you got. You know, when you make me mad, I'm gonna go loot your store. I'm gonna go shoot somebody in your family, so you know how I felt, how hurt I was when you took my daddy and you shot him. When he was running away from the cops, or you took him off to prison and gave him an 80-year prison sentence and didn't even think for 1 second about the fact that he's got a wife and children at home, or he's got a family that loves him. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, what we have to do is understand that and make people realize that black men are human beings. And that's the fundamental idea. See, when you look at the way police deal with black men, and I don't hate cops. I don't think all cops are bad. My father was a cop, actually. My stepfather, my biological father, went to prison. But my stepfather was a cop, and I know that all cops are not bad people. I know that. I've seen good cops. But when you really look at it in more detail, what you see is this consistent dehumanization, where people act like we just don't have any feelings. When you saw what they did to Freddie Gray, where they knew he was injured, they knew he was hurt, they dragged him like a dead animal. You know, when you look at the brother that got shot in Tulsa, when he was trying to sell an illegal gun and ran away from the cops, he said, "I'm losing my breath," after he was shot by accident, and the cop said, "Fuck your breath," and didn't even administer CPR to help him. When you look at what happened with Eric Garner, and he got choked, and he's on the ground saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." The paramedics come in, they don't even try to bring him back to life. They don't even try to resuscitate him. That is a consistent pattern of dehumanization, of inhumane treatment. White people treat dogs better than they treat black men. So I'm not talking about all white people here. What I'm talking about is a systematic idea that black men don't feel pain. There was a survey that was actually shown that actually showed that white people believe that black people feel less pain than white people do. If you look at other issues like prison rape, it's real interesting to me how feminists are so sensitive to sexual assault when it occurs on a college campus or when it occurs in society at large. But they have almost nothing to say about what's happening in prison. Most rapes occur in prison. In fact, in prison, you get no justice because nobody's going to come and lock your accuser up for what they did. And you have to look at your accuser every single morning at breakfast, and you're going to be repeatedly victimized by the same person who raped you yesterday. And so the interesting thing to me is that when we look at the way the criminal justice system looks at black people, we just see this consistent idea that you're less than human. We can treat you any old kind of way. We're going to deal with you like a dog, talk to you like a dog, disrespect you in front of your family, and kill you in front of your kids. And then we're just going to keep going like with business as usual. And what they don't expect, or what they were used to before, is they were used to some bought-out civil rights Negro to come along and say, when somebody just blew out the brain of your family member, whether they tell you, the first thing they tell you is, be calm. Be peaceful. We're going to do a peaceful march. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say what strategy is always the best strategy, but I will say that people are tired of holding hands and singing, "We shall overcome," every time you came up in there with violence. You coming up in there with a gun, eventually somebody's going to come back at you with a gun. And that's natural. The appropriate response to genocide is usually something that should be more assertive than simply holding hands and singing "We shall overcome" and praying that your enemy is somehow going to be punished in the afterlife. That's stupid. That doesn't work. So I'm still processing how to kind of think about and contextualize what's happening in Baltimore. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but the unfortunate reality about Baltimore is that a lot of people have already been hurt. A lot of black people have already been killed. And if you want to really see a microcosm of the way black lives are seen differently from white lives, look at how differently the public reacts when a police officer is shot. When a police officer is shot, the mayor attends the funeral, the whole city, is kind of at a standstill. There's a big parade. There's this whole thing that happens when a police officer gets killed. But when a black man gets killed by a cop, not only is there hardly anything that's said or done to commemorate the life of this person who was also precious to his family, but in many cases the officer is not even indicted, let alone acquitted. I'm not even talking about acquitted. I'm talking about not even indicted. And not indicted means that there's not even reasonable suspicion that you committed a crime. Look, if you want the violence to stop, you're going to have to unravel a whole lot of policies. This mess took 40 years to really create. A lot of it really started with the war on drugs. Michelle Alexander and I, the author of The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander and I agreed that reparations should actually be paid for the war on drugs because trillions of dollars in wealth was extracted from the black community by this criminal justice system. A lot of families were destroyed by the system. A lot of people were hooked on drugs. A lot of people were killed over drugs. A lot of people went to prison over drugs. The CIA was letting the drugs and guns into the black community, but then they wanted to appear to be fighting the war on drugs. So what they did was they said, we're going to just arrest tons and tons and tons of black men to show that we're making progress in the war on drugs. So you've done this to this community for decades. Now these children who grew up with parents who were either traumatized by the system, traumatized by the drugs, killed by the drug-related violence, killed by police, or incarcerated by the police. These children are growing up, and they don't give a damn about you. They care about you about as much as you cared about them. So I think we have to understand that you can't completely marginalize and disrespect and mistreat an entire segment of your society and not expect that to eventually spill back over on you. And from what I see right now, it's probably only going to get worse. So that's all I want to say about this. I will say I believe that Malcolm X would actually be happy to see what he's seeing right now. I don't think any reasonable person would say that if somebody's consistently committing violence against your community, that you should always respond peacefully, because we know that just doesn't not work. It doesn't work. So that's it. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Just so you know, we have a new film out called Resurrecting Black Wall Street, where we talk about the Black Wall Street atrocity in 1921, where hundreds of black people were murdered and had their wealth stolen by angry whites who basically went into the community and looted and burned down 35 city blocks, took down 600 businesses. It's an incredible story that every black child in America should know. If you can support the film, I hope that you will. We're selling pre-orders at resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. That's resurrectingblackwallstreet.com, and you can also check out the trailer. So remember, we use that money to hire and support black people. So I hope you'll join our family on this. And so until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. I am gone. Peace.